Once upon a time, in the small town of Akere, where the mountains watched over the trees and the trees whispered secrets to the wind, a girl named Naomi was born. But before Naomi was even a thought, there was her mother, Fola Shade, a girl so beautiful that even the river seemed to sparkle brighter when she walked by. Fola Shade's beauty was like the morning sun, lighting up the whole schoolyard. Every eye, every boy, every friend saw her and whispered her name like it was magic. But beauty, as they say, can sometimes be a trap, and it was for Fola Shade. Her mathematics teacher, Mr. Olu, a man with eyes like cold stones and a smile like a hidden snake, took notice. Fola Shade, come by my house, he said one day, his voice soft but slippery. He promised to help with her studies, but Fola Shade, innocent as morning dew, didn't know that Mr. Olu's promises were hollow like an empty calabash. When she came, Mr. Olu tricked her. She was alone with him, and his words were like a net, tangling her up until she couldn't escape. Then, he took her to the room and slept with her. That was the day Naomi's life began, though no one knew it yet. Soon, Fola Shade found herself carrying a child. She was pregnant. Her parents, proud and strict as tall palm trees, couldn't bear the shame. They had heard of Olu's ways, always drunk, always stumbling, careless as a broken pot. When they heard of the child, they turned their backs, leaving Fola Shade with no place to go but to Olu's home. So, Fola Shade moved in with Olu. But Olu, oh, he was no comfort. His eyes were often cloudy, his voice rough. He stumbled through the days, sometimes forgetting Fola Shade was there. And so, in that little house, with the roof leaking and the nights long, Fola Shade stayed, her heart heavy like a stone in her chest, waiting for the day her child would be born. And that was how Naomi, a small girl with eyes bright as stars, came into the world, in a town where even the trees seemed to keep secrets. Fola Shade's life with Olu was like a long, dark night without stars. She carried her heavy belly alone in that small broken house. Olu, always stumbling and reeking of sour palm wine, barely noticed her. Each night, he would go out, laugh, and drink until he was more shadow than man. When he came home, he would collapse like a fallen tree, his eyes foggy and his voice loud, like thunder in a storm. Fola Shade sat alone, her hands resting on her belly, whispering soft words to the child inside her. One day, you will see the sun, she'd say, her voice a gentle breeze in the quiet night. She dreamed of a better life for her child, away from Olu's carelessness, away from the noise and the smells. But dreams are only dreams, and for Fola Shade, each day felt heavier than the last. Then, like a bright morning after a stormy night, Naomi was born. Her skin was soft as flower petals, and her eyes sparkled, deep and bright, just like her mother's. The people said she was a beauty, even as a baby. Fola Shade held her close, her heart swelling with love, yet mixed with worry. Olu, she whispered one night as Naomi lay sleeping, our daughter deserves more. She needs care, warmth, love. But Olu only grunted, his mind lost in drunken dreams. His care for Naomi was as thin as smoke, slipping away before it could settle. Fola Shade knew deep down that this house, with its broken roof and broken promises, was no place for Naomi. Fola Shade's heart ached as she watched her daughter grow, knowing that the love she had couldn't protect her from Olu's careless ways. She looked at Naomi, tiny and innocent, and decided she would find a way. Fola Shade knew she couldn't give Naomi the life she deserved in Olu's house. So one day, with her heart heavy but hopeful, she carried Naomi to her grandparents' home. There, Pa James welcomed the little girl with open arms. Pa James was known throughout the town, tall, wise, and as sturdy as an old tree. His voice was like a deep drum beat, and the people respected him, for he was a man of few words but many lessons. Naomi grew up under his watchful eye, a curious and quiet child. She watched her grandfather closely, learning the rhythm of his days. Pa James would sit in his wooden chair under the big tree, eyes fixed on the distance, always deep in thought. He was strict but gentle, guiding her with a steady hand. Yet, like a hidden stream under the soil, Pa James had a secret. When the sun dipped low and the town quieted down, he would take out a small cigarette, roll it carefully, and light it, letting the smoke drift up like whispers to the sky. Naomi, small and curious, often peeked from the corner of the room, watching as the smoke curled from his mouth and nose. She didn't understand it, but she was fascinated, her young mind wrapping around the mystery of it all. In the town, life moved slowly, like the river that curved around the trees. Naomi played with the other children, ran through the fields, and helped Pa James fetch water from the well. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and her laughter was as light as the morning breeze. But Naomi's heart was like a sponge, soaking in everything she saw. She loved her grandfather, respected him, and even imitated the way he held his head high. And in those quiet moments, watching him puff on his cigarette, a tiny spark of curiosity began to flicker in her heart, though she didn't yet know what it meant. Behind Pa James's house, a group of young men gathered every afternoon, their voices loud with laughter, and their hands holding cups filled with sour-smelling drink. They would sit in a circle, sharing cigarettes, the smoke curling around them like tiny clouds. They laughed, joked, and sometimes argued, their voices bouncing through the air like pebbles on water. Naomi, with her curious eyes and quiet footsteps, would slip behind the bushes to watch them. The way they held their cigarettes, blowing smoke from their mouths and noses, reminded her of her father, Olu, back when she was little. And now she watched the smoke dance around these men, curious and captivated. Their faces glowed with a strange joy she didn't quite understand, but something about the way the smoke floated and swirled held her like a spell. She would stay hidden, crouched like a little rabbit, eyes wide as she watched the men make rings with their smoke. Sometimes she'd even see one of them puff out two streams of smoke, one from each nostril, like a dragon from the stories Pa James would tell her. The men never noticed her peeking. They were too caught up in their own world, laughing and passing the cigarettes around. And Naomi, with each passing day, felt her curiosity grow. The smoke, the laughter, the mystery of it all. She didn't understand it yet, but the sight stayed with her, like a little ember glowing in her mind. Little by little, the smoky influence drifted into her thoughts, wrapping around her like the curls of smoke she watched so carefully, leaving a mark that would one day call to her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. One bright afternoon, as Naomi was playing near her home, the young men behind Pa James's house spotted her. They waved her over, laughing and calling her name. "Naomi, come here, little one of them said, grinning. Naomi, always eager to help, ran up to them, her eyes curious and wide. "Can you do us a small favor?" another asked, holding out a few coins. "Get us some cigarettes from the town shop, will you?" Naomi nodded quickly, taking the coins in her tiny hands, feeling proud to be trusted with such an errand. She dashed off to the shop, her feet quick on the dusty path. When she returned with the cigarettes, the men thanked her with big smiles, ruffling her hair and calling her a good girl. The warmth of their laughter made her heart feel light, like she'd done something important. Soon, this small favor turned into a regular task. "Naomi, fetch us some cigarettes, will you?" They'd call out, tossing her coins, knowing she would always help. And each time, Naomi would run off, her feet quick and her heart eager. Over time, the smell of the cigarettes became familiar to her, like the scent of firewood or the flowers by the river. She knew the crinkle of the paper, the light scratch of the matchstick, the first puff that curled into the air, the cigarettes, the smoke, the men's laughter. All of it became a part of her world, a part of the little tasks she gladly did each day. Each time Naomi ran errands for the young men, the sight of cigarettes nestled in her small hands felt like holding a secret. She'd watch them light up, taking slow, thoughtful puffs, their faces calm and focused as the smoke rose like gentle clouds. Even her father, Olu, used to do the same. And her strict grandfather, Pa James, would sometimes sit quietly, puffing on his cigarette in the evening. She noticed how the smoke seemed to wrap around their thoughts, like it held something magical, something only grown-ups knew. What is it about this smoke, she wondered, her heart buzzing with curiosity. Why do they enjoy it so much? The more she watched, the more she noticed. Then, one quiet night, when the town was wrapped in shadows, Pa James sat inside the house, his face tight with anger. He had quarreled with a neighbor earlier, and his heart was heavy like a stone. Without thinking, he took out his cigarette, rolling it between his fingers before lighting it. He forgot to lock the door, the small click that usually kept his secret safely hidden. Naomi, who had been watching quietly from her corner, saw the soft glow of his cigarette lighting up the room. She crept closer, her small footsteps silent as a mouse, eyes wide as she watched her grandfather. He was puffing quickly, his lips tight, the smoke swirling thickly around him like storm clouds. She'd never seen Pa James look this way before. His eyes were dark, his brow furrowed, and he let out a long, heavy sigh with each puff. The smoke seemed to carry his anger up into the air, floating like little whispers that vanished into the night. Naomi thought to herself, maybe smoking is what grown-ups do when they're upset. Maybe it helps take away the bad feelings. She watched as the smoke curled and danced, and Pa James's face softened, bit by bit, like the anger was slipping away with each puff. That night, the idea planted itself firmly in her young heart. She didn't understand everything, but she believed she had found a piece of the secret. Smoking was what people did when things weren't right, when their hearts were stormy, just like Pa James's had been. And in her little mind, the thought grew roots, linking smoke to quieting storms, a habit to calm the raging rivers inside. By the time Naomi reached 12, her curiosity had grown into a deep thirst, a pool she couldn't ignore. The image of Pa James puffing away his anger, the young men laughing as smoke curled around them. It all played in her mind like a song she couldn't shake. One day, as she wandered behind Pa James's house, she noticed a few cigarette butts left on the ground, forgotten by the young men. She picked one up, turning it over in her fingers, feeling the rough paper, the ash smeared along its edges. A thrill ran through her. She quickly tucked it into her pocket, glancing around to make sure no one saw her. Day by day, she began gathering these little scraps, her secret collection growing as she carefully wrapped each piece in an old cloth she'd hidden under her bed. She imagined the moment she would finally try it, wondering if the smoke would taste as mysterious as it looked, or if it would bring her the strange calm she had seen in others. The thirst grew like a small fire inside her, flickering brighter each time she thought of lighting one of those scraps. And so, with her hidden collection and her heart brimming with curiosity, Naomi waited for the day she would finally discover what the smoke truly felt like. One quiet afternoon, with the house empty and Pa James out, Naomi's curiosity burned like a tiny flame. She slipped quietly into Pa James's room, her small feet careful not to make a sound. Her eyes darted around, taking in the dim room, until she spotted something. A small bowl tucked away in the corner, holding a dry, ground-up substance that looked like crushed leaves. She tiptoed closer, her heart pounding. She'd seen Pa James use this before, mixing it carefully and smoking it slowly. The smell was sharp, strange, and powerful. Without fully understanding, she decided to try it herself, feeling a thrill that made her hands shake. She tore a sheet from her notebook, spreading it out flat, and carefully scooped the dry leaf into the paper, rolling it the way she'd seen others do. What Naomi didn't know was that Pa James had mixed something strong in this bowl, a blend of hard drugs and weed. But in her innocent eyes, it was simply the mystery she had been drawn to, something only adults seemed to understand. With the paper twisted into a rough roll, she struck a match and lit the end. She brought it to her lips, her small hands trembling as she took a cautious puff. The smoke hit her throat like fire, harsh and biting, making her cough as her eyes watered, but she pushed through, wanting to feel what the others did. Moments later, a heavy dizziness washed over her, the room spinning like leaves caught in a whirlwind. Her legs wobbled and she stumbled back, her head clouded with a strange, overwhelming fog. The world around her grew dim, and she felt herself falling, her small body crumpling to the floor. She lay there, still and silent, her breathing shallow, as her young body tried to make sense of the powerful, dangerous substance. And as the smoke hung in the air, Naomi drifted into darkness, unaware of the trouble her innocent curiosity had brought her into. Just then, Pa James, passing by her room, caught a strange smell, the faint, unmistakable scent of burning paper. His heart skipped a beat. He pushed open the door, eyes wide, and there, lying pale and limp on the bed, was Naomi, clutching her makeshift cigarette. Her small frame looked so fragile, her face so still, that his heart squeezed with fear. "Naomi," he cried, rushing to her side. His hand shook as he picked up the burnt paper, quickly tossing it to the ground. The shock on his face was like thunder. He could barely believe what he was seeing. Without wasting a moment, he scooped her up in his arms, her body limp like a broken doll. The worry in his eyes was as deep as the river, and his steps were quick and strong as he carried her through the town, calling out for help. The town people turned their heads, whispering, their faces filled with concern as they watched the once mighty Pa James, now a frightened grandfather, rushing his beloved Naomi to the town hospital. He placed her gently on the hospital bed, his heart pounding as the healers gathered around. As he watched them work, his own heart felt as heavy as a stone, the fear of losing her like a shadow that wouldn't let go. The sight of Naomi, his little Naomi, so still and pale, filled him with a sorrow as deep as the forest. Folashade rushed to the hospital as soon as she heard the news. Her heart felt like it was tearing, each step heavier than the last, as she made her way to her daughter's side. When she reached the small room, there lay Naomi, pale and fragile, her little chest rising and falling slowly. Folashade's eyes filled with tears, each drop a weight of worry, guilt, and love. Naomi, my little girl, she whispered, brushing her fingers softly over her daughter's hand. Even Olu, who had drifted far from family matters, arrived, his face filled with a mix of regret and concern. He stood at the foot of the bed, looking down at Naomi with heavy eyes. He hadn't been there for her in the ways he should have, and the sight of his daughter lying so still tugged at something deep inside him. For days, Naomi lay quietly, her small body recovering from the shock. Pa James never left her side, his face lined with worry, his mind replaying the moment he found her, the smell of smoke and fear still fresh in his memory. Finally, one morning, Naomi's eyes fluttered open. She looked up, seeing her mother, her grandfather, and even her father watching over her. A small, weak smile touched her lips and her voice was soft as a whisper. Mama, Grandpa. Folashade held her hand, relief flooding over her. My child, why did you do this? She asked gently, her voice trembling. Naomi looked down, her young face thoughtful, as if she was searching for the right words. I thought smoking was what people did when they felt sad or angry, she said quietly. I saw Father, and I saw Grandpa, and even the boys behind the house. I thought it was something that would help me feel strong. Pa James closed his eyes, the weight of her words pressing on him like a heavy stone. Folashade hugged Naomi close, her tears falling like rain, each one a promise that she would protect her daughter, that she would guide her, so she would never feel the need to seek strength in smoke or shadows again. And Olu, silent but tearful, stood by, feeling the sting of his own failings and hoping somehow to make things right for his little girl. Word of Naomi's smoking spread through Akere like the wind, touching every corner, every household, and every ear. The people murmured with shock and concern, and soon the elders called a gathering under the big Iroko tree where all important matters were discussed. The elders, wise and stern, looked over the crowd, their faces heavy with disappointment. They called for the young men who had spent their days smoking behind Pa James's house, their faces now lowered in shame. The eldest among the leaders, his voice like thunder, spoke with a grave tone. Young men, look at the harm your carelessness has caused. Children see more than we know. They learn from what they watch. How can we allow such things to happen to the innocent in our town? The young men nodded, their heads hung low as the elder continued, his words like arrows hitting their mark. He warned everyone about the dangers of setting poor examples for children, reminding them that the young are like clay, easily molded by what they see around them. To protect the town's future, the elders declared, from this day forward, smoking shall not be done openly in Akere. We will not let our children be drawn into habits that harm them. The people nodded in agreement, their hearts heavy with the lessons they had learned. They looked around at one another, each person vowing silently to protect the innocence of the children and to guide them wisely, knowing that the eyes of the young were always watching, always learning. When Naomi finally returned home, her small hand in Folashade's, a quiet promise lingered in the air. Olu, standing by with a look of regret in his eyes, reached down and held his daughter's other hand. For the first time, he saw clearly the path his choices had set before her, and he knew things had to change. From now on, Naomi, Olu spoke softly, I will be the father you deserve. I'll leave those bad habits far behind. His voice was steady, yet full of remorse, like a river changing its course. Folashade, too, felt a newfound strength in her heart. Together, they would rebuild their family, one careful step at a time. They made a quiet pact to shield Naomi from the mistakes of the past and to fill her days with love, warmth, and guidance. The whole town had learned from Naomi's story. Her journey became a tale told to children, a gentle warning about the power of example. No longer did anyone smoke openly in Akere. It became an unspoken rule, a shield of protection for the town's young hearts and minds. As time went on, Naomi grew in a home full of hope and change. Her parents, now closer than ever, worked together to give her a safe place to grow. And the town, united by this lesson, stood watch over all their children, as the mountains watched over Akere, strong and steady, protecting each precious life from harm. I hope you enjoyed the tale. If so, please like the video, share it with your family and friends, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.